How you doing? I'm CK with Under Pressure Performance, and today we're going to be showing you how to install one of our twin turbo systems on the 2011 and up Dodge Durango RT. Now, this is the one with the 5.7 Hemi engine in it. So let's go ahead and get started on it. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is start disassembling everything and removing all the stuff to make room for our twin turbo setup in here. So we'll start off, let's go ahead and take off the front fascia of it. It's going to be the front bumper, the headlights. We're going to take off a lot of the plastic shrouds and covers, which are going to be these guys here, and the front bumper covers and that. And we're also going to go ahead and take off the crash impact bar. The impact bar we're going to be modifying. We'll put that back on later. We'll go over that later. But we want to open up the front area here so we have complete access to it. It's going to make installing the intercooler and the piping and that a lot easier. So we'll go ahead and tear the whole front assembly down so it basically looks nice and open like this. Alright, next thing we're going to go after is going to be the engine bay and that. So we'll start off with the exhaust manifolds or headers if you got those on there. We'll go ahead and remove those because that's going to be replaced with our turbo system ones. And then we'll start taking apart part of the engine here. So your air intake or your intake air box, including the factory box and all that stuff that's over here, we're going to go ahead and remove that out of there. The ABS module itself, we'll go ahead and pull that guy out. And that's going to come out with this bracket. We are going to be reusing this. We're just going to get it out of the way for now. So we'll set both of these aside. And it's important to note, we want to go ahead and label all of the ABS lines before we pull them off, so that way we know exactly where they go back on. What we're going to be doing is shifting the ABS module forward slightly. All of the plastic cladding around the outside here, we'll go ahead and pull that off. We just want to really open this up and free it up so we have a lot of room to work in here. So we're trying to free up this whole area over here, so we're going to have the manifold come out and one of the turbos sitting here. Now over on the other side here, we're going to be removing quite a bit of stuff as well. The coolant jug, go ahead and take that out, set it aside for now. We're going to be pulling out the fuse box, so we'll just disconnect it, as well as the big box that houses it down below here. We're going to pull out the ECU. This is part of the plastic trim that goes and covers on the wiring. So we're going to do basically the same thing on this side and just open up that whole corner there. As well as some of the plastic cladding on the back side here. So what we're trying to do is open it up to where those wires are nice and loose and free. We have the ability to move them around, and we've got a nice big open area cleared out right in here because this is where we're going to be putting our turbo. Alright, we're also going to be removing the windshield washer fluid bottle from this side, so we'll just go ahead and cap these off for now, or you can drain it out, either or. We'll get that and pull that out of the way. That way we've got everything nice and cleared away for us. Alright, the other thing we're going to be removing is going to be the tranny cooler lines. Now these go from the transmission back there all the way up to the front. This block here is actually on the side of the transmission. We take this out just to make it a little bit easier. We're going to be going and pull these out. We're going to discard these. We're going to be replacing the lines with some stainless steel AN lines to make it a little bit more flexible and easier to maneuver. This block here we are going to be keeping. We're going to be reusing it and putting it back on the transmission. So once we get to that, we'll show you what that looks like. So next we're going to start off with the ABS unit here. We're going to go ahead and take the ABS module off of its existing bracket. Now there's 3 bolts. There's going to be 2 on the bottom side here and 1 on the side here. And we'll go ahead and take those off, and then we're going to mount it to the new ABS bracket, which is going to be this black one here. And we're going to use 2 of the M6 1.0 by 20 millimeter bolts here with the lock washers. That's going to attach it to our new bracket, and then we're going to be rebolting this back to the existing original bracket. So basically we're shifting the ABS module over slightly. So we'll go ahead and bolt this up using the original holes and with the M10. And for this part here, we're actually going to reuse the existing or the original bolts that were in there, and then we'll bolt it in with the nuts just like so. So again, this is just taking the module and basically shifting it over and back slightly. And then for the side bracket up here, we're going to reuse the existing bolts as well to the module. And we've got the S-bend bracket here, and that one is going to connect it back over to our original like that. So we'll go ahead and get this all bolted up, and then we'll show you what it looks like. And now you can see we've got it mounted up to our bracket here. And again, we've got the S-bend bracket here, and we're using the factory bolt there. We've got the new M6 bolt here. We're using the 2 factory ones here, again with the M6 nuts on the top there. And then we use the new M6 bolts here going into the actual ABS module. They're a little bit shorter than these, so that way it's going to allow it to sit back flush in it. So now we can go ahead and take this assembly and we'll put it back in. We also, at the same time, we want to take these are the two master lines coming from the master cylinder. We're going to go ahead and take those out for now. We're going to be modifying those and bending them around so that they fit in there. So now we can go ahead and set this back in, put it back into place, and we'll go ahead and hook these lines back here up to it. Some of these lines we'll need to pull them because we are again shifting the ABS module forward and to the side a little bit here. So we are going to need to tweak these lines, but there's more than enough slack on them that they've got plenty of room to be played with. Just we make sure when you bend them, you don't kink them or break them open or create a pinch on them. You know, you want to bend with nice big long swooping radiuses and that. So we'll go ahead and get this installed, and then we'll show you what it looks like once we get done. Next, we're going to go ahead and mount the ECU in there. Now, for these Dodge systems, many times the ECU either has to be replaced or sent off to be modified so that way we can have it tuned. So if you guys are using like HP tuners, now would be a good time. You want to take your ECU out, send it away to HP tuners, have them do the modification on it, and then they'll mail it back. If you're using like Diablo Sport, they'll just mail you a new ECU. You want to make sure you start to put the new ECU in it because we want to go ahead and get this in before we do a lot of the majority of the rest of the work here. So to mount the ECU, we have two brackets. One is going to be the little S-shaped bracket here, the shallow one. It's a little bit more shallow than the one we used on the ABS. And then the other one's going to be just a 90-degree bracket here. So looking at the face of it, we're going to mount both the brackets to the back side, and we're just using M6 1.0 by 30 millimeter bolts with the nut, and we'll just go ahead and bolt those up. And we're going to go ahead and leave those somewhat loose for right now. Now what we're doing is the ECU is mounted under the box before. We're removing all of that, and we're going to shift the ECU so it actually sits right down in here like this. Now in order to do that, for this upper bracket here, we're going to go ahead and drill a hole right here. So what we're going to do is we'll mount this up. We'll see where this bracket, the top bracket, aligns to, and then we'll go ahead and drill a little hole right in the behind the headlight assembly here. This bracket here is actually mounting to an existing stud that's already on the frame rail. So we'll go ahead and get this bolted up and then show you what it looks like. So we went ahead and dropped the ECU down. We got it bolted in now, and you can see the L 90-degree bracket here. We're coming off this back one, and then that's going to bolt up. And again, we just bolt it up loosely to that, and then we'll find our spot here, drill our hole, and then that one's in. For the S-brand bracket that's down here, we bolted that up to the existing stud, and then we just use the M8 1.25 nut. And then that S bracket comes over and bolts to the bottom of the ECU. So the ECU is nice and secure in here like that now. Next we'll go ahead and run the wiring in that to it. Now for the wiring, we're going to go ahead and remove this from up in here. A lot of this is going to get heat wrapped, plus we want the ability to have the flexibility to move it around as we need and kind of tuck it out of the way. So we'll go ahead and route the two connectors for the ECU back down over there. We'll get those connected in, and then again we want this whole area in here kind of nice and cleared out so we have a lot of room to work with the turbos and that, and they've got a lot of distance so they're not melting anything with the heat. All right, next we're going to go ahead and use our aluminumized heat wrap. That's going to be this roll here. What we're going to do with that is basically just wrap all of the wiring, hoses, anything that's going to be near the heat source. So the manifold's going to come off right here, the turbos are going to sit here, and then the downpipe's going to shoot right back down through here. So all this in this area here, we want to go ahead and wrap it up, make it nice and protected, keep the heat away from it. Same thing on this side. They're pretty much symmetrical, so the turbo's going to come up, sit here, downpipe's going to go right through here. So some of these lines and that we're going to want to head and heat wrap up. So we'll go ahead and heat wrap all that stuff up. That way it's nice and protected in that, and then we'll show you kind of what it looks like when we get done. But basically anything that's going to be near a heat source, and just use your judgment on it. You know, we want to make sure if it looks like it's going to be near the heat, might as well go ahead and wrap it. There's plenty of heat wrap here to do pretty much the whole engine bay if you need to. All right, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and install the turbo manifolds. And there's one of these on each side. Both of them are going to go in facing forward and up, so the turbo's actually going to be coming up on the front here. We'll have the same thing on the passenger side over there. Now as these go in, especially on this side over here, you got some power steering lines, the AC lines and whatnot in the way. Some of those you're going to have to push over a little bit and bend and tweak. We don't want them up against or rubbing on the turbo or the manifolds. Just again, same thing as the brake lines that you're going to have to push out of the way. Make sure you don't hard kink those or do any really, really tight, sharp bends that's going to actually pinch them off. But we'll go ahead and stick these in on both sides. Now both of these will go in from the top. They do take a little finagling to go in. You kind of have to go in and roll it and twist it to get it in there. But they go in from the top. It's a lot easier than going from the bottom. For the gasket, you can either reuse the factory existing gasket, or what we prefer to do is actually toss that away. We're not going to use a gasket. We're going to use silicone. Now that's not RTV sealant like from your automotive store. It's actually 100% pure silicone from like Home Depot or Lowe's. Basically go into your Same thing you would use around your bathroom and tub and tile. Just get a caulking gun with actual, make sure it's 100% pure silicone, it can't be latex. It's actually made of silica sand. It's got a higher melting point than the steel does. It can't span any gaps, so you know it's not going to fix any major defects or flaws, but these things are all decked from here before they leave, so everything's nice and smooth and flat. So it's basically just a really, really light layer. You don't want to squirt it on so it's breaking away and getting sucked through the turbo. Just put a really light layer around each of the ports on it, and then go ahead and slide this on and bolt it up. We've seen issues with the factory gaskets, especially on the turbocharged applications. There's a lot more heat and pressure with the turbos in there where it'll actually start blowing the gaskets out. We have yet to have an issue or a failure with silicone because there's really nothing there to actually fail. It's basically just pushing the flange here directly against the head itself. So go ahead and get these lubed up with the silicone, slide them in there, get them bolted up into place. Alright, now when we install the turbo manifolds, we're going to go ahead and replace all the hardware that comes with them as well. Now these are what we're going to be replacing with. They're M8 1.25 by 20 millimeter bolts, and that's going to be replacing all of them. This one came in actually with aftermarket headers, so I don't have the factory ones to show you, but all of the factory bolts and studs, we're going to go ahead and remove that out of there, and all 16 of them are going to be replaced with these guys. So when we bolt it up, it makes it a lot easier to actually get them and fit them in there. Alright, now here you can see we got the manifolds in. This is on the driver's side. And we went ahead and heat wrapped some of the brake lines and that going to the ABS unit, as well as some of the wiring and that down there. Again, same thing over here on the passenger side. The manifolds installed. And we've got the heat wrap for all of our electrical wiring. Anything that's going to be in this general area down here, went ahead and heat wrapped it up. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and prep the turbos, get those ready to go in. So what we're going to do first is loosen all 6 of these bolts on the turbine and all 6 of the bolts on the compressor. What that's going to do is allow us to clock this so the 3 pieces will actually be independent from each other. That way we can get all the orientation correct in there. Now when we bolt this in, the oil feed here and the oil return here need to be completely vertical. The feed on top, obviously. You can't have it cocked at an angle. If you do, the oil's not going to drain out of there properly. So we're also going to go ahead and bolt the oil return up, which is basically this guy right here. It's just going to bolt right to the bottom there. Now, there are 2 different versions of this. The driver's side is going to be with a 45 degree, and the passenger side is going to be with a straight. So the straight one's pretty simple. This side here is MPT, so this gets pipe thread tape on it, like Teflon tape. This side here is AN. This does not. Don't put any sealant or any Teflon tape or anything on this. Only on the MPT sides with the one without the flare. So the straight one's pretty easy. Just Teflon it up. We'll put some sealant on there, tighten it up, and we'll bolt it on. That one's good to go. The other one here, we need to actually clock it and orientate it in the proper position. So once we get done, we want it to basically be facing like this towards the exhaust side of the housing over here. Next up is going to be the oil feed, and there's 2 different versions of that. These are for the 5871 turbos. You're going to get a fitting that looks just like this, just an 1/8 inch thread. Again, this side here will Teflon tape, and again, the AN side we do not. This is just going to simply thread right here into the top of the turbo, just like that. Now, if you guys are using the 6182, the upgraded turbos, those are ball bearings, so those are actually going to get an oil restrictor, which is this little brass guy right here. All right, and then the last piece for the turbo is going to be these 4-bolt to V-band adapters, and these are basically just going to bolt right on the back of here with the M8 125 by 20 millimeter bolts. And again, on this, we don't use a gasket, just a really light layer of silicone on here. So just put a real light film layer, bolt that up, and then this is going to go in there. It's a lot easier to install with the V-bands than it is trying to line up bolts once you get it inside the car. The next one we're going to go after is going to be the oil feed. Now, just below the oil filter here is going to be the oil pressure sending unit, which is this guy here. We're going to go ahead and take that out, and then we're going to put in this male, female, female T, and we'll go ahead and thread it up in there. And it's basically going to go back in just like this, just how we took it out. The only difference is the dash 4 line here, and this is a 1/8 inch to dash 4. We're going to screw in the side of the T there. That's going to be facing out towards the passenger side. So go ahead and get that installed, and we'll show you what it looks like here in just a minute. All right, now for the oil feed, what we're going to be doing is taking the oil pressure sending unit. That's located just below the oil filter here. We'll go ahead and pull that out, and we're going to stick this assembly in its place. This is just a male, female, female T with a 1/8 inch to dash 4 adapter and a 90-degree fitting here. Now this is going to screw up into where the oil pressure sending unit is currently, and then the oil pressure sending unit we're actually going to screw into the 90 down here on the bottom. This dash 4 is what's going to feed our oil lines going to the turbos. So this is going to screw up in there just like this. Now the dash 4 we're going to want facing towards the passenger side over here. The 90 degree with the oil pressure sending unit, it's going to be facing slightly back and towards the engine. That way it's horizontal on here rather. That's going to give a little bit more clearance room for our downpipe when we go to put that in later. Now the way the oil lines are set up on this is actually daisy chaining it together. So we're going to come off of here and this is going to feed the passenger side turbo. From there, it's going to have a T-fitting that goes over the driver's side turbo, so there's actually only going to be one oil feed line on there. Now, when we go to put this together, any of the fittings, like this, these are NPT National Pipe Thread, those are all going to require Teflon tape, so we'll go ahead and use a little bit of Teflon tape. So it's going to be this connection here, this connection here, the connection here, and the connection where the NPT goes in. Each one of those gets Teflon tape. Any of them with the flare fitting like this do not get Teflon tape. This is actually creating a seal as you tighten it up against the fitting itself. So do not put Teflon tape on there, you'll actually inhibit the seal on it. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get this assembled, we'll get it all put in there, and then we'll show you what it looks like once it's up inside. Alright, now you can see here right below the oil filter, we have our T-fitting there with the dash 4 fitting going off to the left there, and then right down here is our 90 with the factory oil pressure sending unit. Alright, next up we're going to go ahead and install the first oil line in the system. The way this system is designed is actually one oil line is going to come off the block or the feed that we just installed. It's going to go up to the passenger side turbo. From there it's going to have a T-fitting and daisy chain over to the driver's side turbo. So there's actually only going to be one feed line in the bottom here. We'll go ahead and install that now. Now this is going to be the 24-inch long, so it's the shorter of the oil lines, and it's got a 30 and a 45 degree. So if you actually look, the angles are slightly different. The one that we're going to cut down here is going to be the 30-degree angle. So we'll go ahead and slide this up in there. This is going to feed basically right around the outside of the alternator, and this side here with the 30 degrees is going to plug in to our oil feed plate where we just tapped in right by the oil pressure sending unit. So we'll go ahead and get this installed in there, and then we'll show you where to connect this side, the 45-degree side, to the turbo once we get up top here in just a minute. Alright, now to install the dipstick tube, we're going to go ahead and slide it back into place. Now we're going to have to bend it slightly away from the engine to clear the new manifold that's in there, and it's going to come with this new bracket that's going to bolt it up. Now the short tab here is going to bolt to the valve cover, and the long side of the tab here, we're going to actually use the cushion clamp like this. The cushion clamp is going to wrap around the dipstick, and we'll bolt that up to the bracket like that. Now the cushion clamp side is going to use, bolt it up here, you can see, it's going to use a M5 by 16 millimeter long bolt with the locking nut. The other side here is going to use an M6 by 35 millimeter long with a bolted nut. And basically what we're doing is we're going to clamp onto the dipstick like that, and then we're just going to bolt it up right to the valve cover. And we'll show you, we've got the dipstick in there, we've got the clamp already around it, and so this hole right here is the one that we're going to actually be bolting through. You can see right here on part of the valve cover. So this bracket is basically going to sit in there just like that, and it's going to reach over and grab a hold of the dipstick itself. Alright, now with this kit, there's actually 6 downpipes. Now to avoid some of the confusion, we're going to go ahead and lay them out here basically exactly like they're going to go in the vehicle. That way there's some orientation to them. So we'll start over here on the driver's side. Now the driver's side is going to be the one with the shorter of the 2 wastegate dumps here. That's going to be your first one that goes in. So this is going to go right up to the turbo. This of course goes to your wastegate, and then this is going to slide down. Now these first 2 pipes on both of these are going to go in from up top. The other 4 pipes are actually going to go in from underneath. So this will be the first one on the driver's side. Next up is going to be this mid pipe here, and it's got a 45 up here closer, whereas this side over here has more of the pie cuts on it. Last in the system is going to be this one right here, and the hanger on that is straight with a 45-degree bend in it, and that goes towards the rear just like that. On the passenger side here, the first pipe up is going to be similar to the driver's, except this one's got a longer wastegate dump tube on it. Again, this is going to, right where the pie cuts are, is going to bolt right up to the turbo. This is going to sit in there basically like this. Next up is the mid pipe. Now this is the one with the pie cuts, and the pie cuts is going to go right up towards the front against our first down pipe on this side. And then the last one is going to be this one here. Now the 2 45-degree bends on this one are going to go towards the rear, and this is the one with the double 90-degree kind of S-shaped hanger that's on there. So that's kind of how it's laid out. Now again, these 2 first pipes will go in from up top, and the other 4 pipes are going to go in from the bottom. Be careful when you do this one on the passenger side here. As you're sliding it in, it is close to the oil pressure setting unit, the one that we moved earlier doing the oil feed, and you want to make sure you don't just jam it in there, so you might break that. All right, and you can see the first section of the downpipe on the passenger side coming down here. We'll make our first connection right here, just to the side of the oil pan, and then that's going to shoot up over the top of the subframe here, and over the top of the diff and axle assemblies coming through there, over that subframe, and then we'll make our second junction right here. And then the third part of the system is going to be running from there back. Now, we got the exhaust mount with the hanger. It's going to go right there. And what we're doing is we're reusing the middle bolt on the transmission mount here. And we just bolt that up facing rearward, and that's going to plug right into it there. And then we come back to here. All right, now you can see the driver's side downpipe coming right down here, again making its first connection right to the side of the oil pan. That's going to go, this one's a little bit tighter up in there, it's going to go right up over the top of, again, the diff assembly in that, and the axles, and come right down here. We're making our second connection, and into this third section of the downpipe, which goes back to where the V-band is. Now this one, we include the mount for it, and we're reusing this existing bolt location here on the frame, and we just bolt it up, and then the downpipe's going to slide right into that there. Alright, now to connect up the last part of the exhaust, we're supplying the kit with these V-band clamps, because there's so many different types of exhaust, whether it's stock or aftermarket. This will work with pretty much any of them, although we do highly recommend a full 3-inch catback exhaust. So we're including it with the 3-inch V-band ring here, and we've terminated our downpipes here with the 3-inch V-band. So what you're going to do is basically just cut your exhaust right in this area where it's at. This ring will slide over your 3-inch exhaust, and then you'll weld it up to your existing exhaust. That's going to just clamp right to our downpipes here. So we're providing you with the flange that we need to actually mate to it. Now if you are running a smaller exhaust, you need to go to a muffler shop and have them swell up a little piece. You know, if you're running a 2.5-inch exhaust, they can swell it up to 3-inch, so it'll fit inside of here and then weld it up for you. Or that's how we're going to make our connection on the back side here. Alright, now so we're going to start preparing for the intercooler install. So we said remove this before. This was the power steering cooler that went here, and it just pops off these two plastic brackets. What we're going to need to do is actually shave these down real carefully. You want to make sure you don't hit your AC condenser. But go ahead and grind those down so they're nice and smooth and flat. That's going to prepare for where we're going to be putting the intercooler up in there. We're going to be relocating the power steering cooler down here later. We'll show you that once we get to it. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to modify the crash bar here a little bit so it sits on there just like this. On the back side of it, we're going to need to notch it out and make room for the intercooler itself. So what we've done is 1 3/4 inches away from this edge here. We're going to come down, we're going to cut down 2 inches, and we're going to come over here 7 inches away from that, and we're going to make a 1/2 inch cut here, and then we're basically just connecting the two. Very, very similar over on this side. We're going to come over 2 1/4 inches, so it's slightly different than that side. We're going to cut down, again, 2 inches. Again, this side's going to have 7 1/4 inches, and then we'll go ahead and cut down a 1/2 inch, and again, connect it between there. Basically, this is going to go on once we get the intercooler bolted up. So, test fit it. If it doesn't fit, you'll need to shave and grind some more, but this will give you the basic dimensions of where to start as far as cutting out. You don't want to cut too much of it out. It is going to significantly decrease the structural integrity in the event of a crash if you just leave this thing out or cut it up too much. So we want to try and leave as much intact as possible. So that gives you the dimensions again. 2 1/4 inches on this side, 1 3/4 inches on this side. 7 inches is your cut length here, 7 1/4 is your cut length here, and again we're cutting down 2 inches on each side and a 1/2 inch right here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is prepare for how to mount the intercooler. We're going to be drilling these 2 holes here that we're going to hang our brackets from. So what we're going to do is on the passenger side here, we're 3 1/4 inches away from this edge here, and just above the lip of the bar here that we were cutting out of it, we're going to go ahead and drill a 3/8 inch hole there. And then the same thing on this side, we're 2 7/8 inches away from this side, and again just above this lip here, we'll go ahead and drill a hole there. That's going to give it 2 holes that we're going to hang our brackets from to actually mount the intercooler. Alright, now here you can see our line coming up from the bottom, and this again has the 45 on this side. This is the shorter of the lines. And then from there we're going to connect to our T-fitting, which is going to go right into the oil feed on the turbo that we installed. And this T-fitting is a double male, so we're just going to daisy chain off of that. Now the second oil line is going to be the longer of the dash 4 lines. It's got the 45 on this end, and then we're just going to simply loop that right around the front here and over to this side here to this turbo with a 90-degree on that side. Now that we've got the bar cut out, we're going to go ahead and mount the intercooler. Now, we have it already on there so you can kind of see what it looks like as the finished product, but it is easier to actually mount the intercooler to the front brace here before we mount it up. So all we're going to do is our 2 bolts that we drilled out here, we're going to go ahead and slide in our M8 50mm long bolts and just put a nut on the back side of that. That's going to go into the top bracket on the intercooler. Then down here on the bottom, we're going to use our S-bend bracket. They're these short brackets, and they're the same on both sides. And we're basically just going to bolt those up with the M8 by 20mm long. And again, put a nut on the back side of it. Those are going to go in the lower intercooler bolt holes here. Then once we're going to do that, we're going to go ahead and just use 2 self-tapping screws, the sheet metal screws, and drill those right into the core support bumper here. Then we go ahead and mount the whole thing back up. Now this is a pretty snug, tight fit on there, so it should be nice and sturdy by the time you get done on here. Now for the intercooler setup, it's easiest just to show you once we get it installed here. So we're just going to kind of go over the layout on it. So over here on the passenger side, we're going to start with a 2-inch 45-degree coupler. Now for those of you guys using the bigger 6182 turbos, this will actually be a 2.5-inch to 2-inch reducer coupler. So we're going to start with that coupler. It's going to bend down, and we're going to go into our first passenger side intercooler pipe. Now this is the one with the 45 and the 90 on it. That's basically just going to come right down under where your headlight housing here bolts and right into the intercooler. For the driver's side, we're going to come off with a straight coupler fitting. And again, for those of you guys using the 6182Rs, this is going to be a reducer. It'll be a 2.5-inch on the turbo side down to a 2-inch for the intercooler piping. Now this intercooler pipe is the driver's side one. It's got a 45 and 2 90s on it. So it's going to 45 down and then 90 under. And it's again just coming right under the headlight housing area here. And we're going to go right into the intercooler. Off the bottom of the intercooler, we're going to feed our throttle body. And that's going to be the first pipe that's going to come around, make a horseshoe bend here. We're just coming off with a straight coupler there. And then you can see right in here, we've got a 3-inch 90 pointing it upwards. And we're just going to go up right behind the headlight housing area here. And this is our longer pipe here, which is going to be a straight with a 45, 45, and that's going to curve right back into the throttle body here. And then we're just using a self-tapping screw, sheet metal screw. We're just going to mount that tab right here for the intercooler piping to help brace it. And then, of course, our blow-off valve installed there. All right, now we're going to go ahead and modify the upper radiator hose here. And what we're going to basically do is cut the end of it off. So it was about yay long. What we're doing is we're going to cut it down and shorten it up. We want the hose clamp to still fit within the straight section right before the 90 here, because we're keeping the 90 degree on there. All we're doing is simply cutting it down so that this hose is going to be a little bit closer to the radiator up in here. So you can see we've cut it down. Now we'll go ahead and get this reattached. That's going to give us a little bit more clearance room back here. All right, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and mount the turbosmart blow-off valve. Now, in order to do that, before we do it, we're going to go ahead and prepare it. Now you notice it's got 2 actual port holes on here. One's on the right and one's going to be on the left of the turbosmart image. And there is 2 fittings. One of them is the nipple, and then one of them is just the little plug. We're going to go ahead and plug the one on the right, and we're going to use the nipple and the one on the left. They are universal, so you can kind of put them on there however and rotate it around, but just how it's going to fit on there for us works out better that way. Now this goes on, and it's basically just the same thing as like a V-band clamp where it'll actually clamp on. The only difference is there's this O-ring, and you want to go ahead and set the O-ring on there. Now don't use any seal or anything like that. Just make sure the O-ring's sitting on there around that lip before you actually put it on, and make sure it stays in there. That way you don't pinch it or get it caught in there and cocked in any weird way. And then basically we'll just put that right onto the upper intercooler pipe, clamp it down with our V-band clamp, and we're done. All right, now that we've got the down pipes in, before we tighten those up, we're going to go ahead and install the blow-off valves. That's going to give us a little bit of free play. Once we get the blow-off valves set in there and locked down, we'll go ahead and go back through all 3 downpipe sections, and we'll tighten the V-band clamps on those. But before we put the blow-off valves in, we need to go ahead and prepare them for install. Now, first thing we're going to do is they've actually got 4 ports on them, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. One of them on the bottom is going to need to be plugged, and the other one on the bottom is going to get the nipple put in it. For the 2 on the top, one of them you can plug, and the other one you can put the nipple in. When we actually do the install on this, the only port that we're going to use on the blow-off valve is going to be the one on the bottom with the nipple. Okay, don't connect anything to the top one, don't put a plug on it, don't do anything with it. If you're using an electronic boost controller that uses both ports, that's fine, then you can use both of them, but consult the boost control manufacturer and the instructions on that for how to set that up. But what we're doing is just a simple basic install. It's just going to be the 7 PSI. We're going to only use one port on the bottom. That is imperative that you plug the other port that's on the bottom. And it is also imperative that both the ports on the top, at least one of them, is open to atmosphere and just able to breathe. We don't want to plug it up. So on the passenger side over here, the one we're going to use is going to be the bottom ports, or the ones with the nipple are going to be the ports on the left of the turbosmart image here. For the driver's side, it's going to be the opposite. We're going to put the nipples on the right-hand side, and then the other ones are going to get the plugs. And on the bottom of it here, as we put it in, it's got this fire ring. Now the fire ring goes in and it should stick out a little bit like that. Now as we put this on, it should push in, and then we'll be able to connect our V-band clamp around it. If you just set it up there, the V-band clamp won't readily go on. It does actually seat down in that. That's going to put a little bit of preload and pressure against the valve seat that's inside of here. Once we get the wastegates prepared, it's pretty easy to install them. It's basically just 2 V-band clamps. Now they are different sizes on the input and the output. They do come with both of them. So what you can do is just basically set this on. The bottom side is going to go towards the manifold, and the top side here is going to go towards the downpipe. And we'll go ahead and get those clamped on. Once those are clamped on, we'll snug them up, tighten them, and then we'll go back through and tighten all the V-band clamps through the rest of the sections of the downpipe. That'll kind of solidify those and lock those in place. Alright, now over here on the driver's side, you can see we got the wastegate installed. Now the bottom port again is going to the manifold, and the side one's going right to the downpipe. We'll get that all tightened up. To hook up the vacuum line, it's pretty simple and straightforward. We're just going to take a vacuum line and run right from the bottom port here over to the output on the compressor cover. There's a little brass fitting on the compressor cover, and we just run right straight to there. Again, if you are using a boost control of any sort, consult your boost control manufacturer as far as how to hook that up. Over here on the passenger side, it's the exact same. We just got it bolted right up to the manifold and then to our recirculating tube here, and there's a flex section in the recirc tube to give it a little bit of playroom, so that makes it a little easier to install. And again, same thing, vacuum line coming off the bottom port on the wastegate, just going right over to the compressor cover here. Okay, next thing we're going to do is remove the evap system. Now what that is, basically plugs in right behind the vacuum, right behind the throttle body there. We've got the evap solenoid here, and then a couple of lines that are going in and down inside there. We're just going to go ahead and pull all these out. We're going to disregard that and just get rid of that. Now inside the tuning software, you are going to need to shut down the evap system, or the check engine lights for it rather. The line that's left down here that returns back to the fuel cell, leave that open, don't plug it. If you plug it, then you might have overpressurization issues with the fuel cell itself on hot days. The reason we're doing that is once this goes under boost and we're actually applying positive pressure to it, we don't want to be forcing that positive pressure back into the fuel tank itself. So by disconnecting that entirely, we get rid of that. On top of that, we're going to go ahead and use that port that we did. That's going to be where we connect up our blow-off valve. So you can see we ran the vacuum line from that port there, and it just goes right over to the top port here on our blow-off valve. Now for the brake line routing, now that we've got the turbo and everything mounted in there, we'll kind of know where it is, and that way we know how to maneuver around it. So the two that go from the master cylinder here, we're going to go ahead and bolt those back in, and then we're going to kind of bend and tweak those around. Now those are going to come down, and we want to position them so they go under the manifold and the turbo in that here. And we want to put them so they've got at least, you know, a ½ inch to an inch worth of clearance room up under here, so that way we're not right up against it for the heat. And then we'll go ahead and bend those and put those right back into our ABS module. Again, we shifted that ABS module forward a little bit. Now again, it's important to note when you're doing any bending or tweaking with them, do not just crank on them. We don't want to fold them in half, you don't want to break them open, and you don't want to kink them. So nice gradual bends, but we're just going to route them from here down. And again, for reference, in case these guys didn't mark it, the front one on the master cylinder goes to the passenger side one on the ABS module, and the rear one on the master cylinder goes to the driver's side on the ABS module down there. But we're just going to shoot them right down under here, and we'll go ahead and get those reconnected up. Alright, now to go over the power steering setup, because we're going to be modifying some of these lines now that we've got this extra stuff in here. First thing we're going to do is right on the power steering pump here, where the reservoir connects up to it, has this 90 degree. We'll go ahead and unbolt it here with the 12mm. We'll pull that off, and we're going to cut the 90 degree section right off of that. So it used to sit on there like that. We'll go ahead and cut it clean off. That way we've got a nice straight coming out of here. What we're going to do is we'll wrap out of there with our 3/4 inch hose. That's just going to come off there, wrap up around this area, basically just like this, and we're going to go right to our reservoir that's up there. For the other one, the smaller one that's on the top, we're going to use the longer hose here. This is going to connect up to the top, and then we're going to take this and we're going to run this down underneath the manifold right here, right alongside the frame rail, and we'll come out down below just behind the radiator area. That's where we're going to be mounting up our power steering cooler here in just a little bit. For the power steering lines, we kept the reservoir remote up here. We went ahead and replaced this one. Now the top one is going to go down to our cooler down below, and we'll show you a little bit later once we get down there where that connects up to. And then the lower one here is the bigger one. This one we're going to go ahead and completely replace as well. Now this is the hose with the 90-degree bend in it, and the 90-degree bend is going to go over here on the engine side, and then it just basically loops right around here and comes back to here. Now it is a little bit long. We left it a little bit long, that way you can cut it to fit kind of thing. So you probably end up having to cut about an inch off of it. That way it's not kinked or bound up over here. It's not creating a high spot like this. We basically want to be downhill slope all the way with no kinks or bends in it. All right, now we're going to go to the lower radiator hose. Because we got the downpipes and everything going through here, the lower radiator hose is going to get replaced. And we're going to go ahead and replace it with this. So this is a inch 7.5 45-degree coupler with the stainless steel lower radiator hose, and then this is a inch 7.5 to inch and a half 90-degree reducer on this end. We're going to go ahead and basically assemble it just like this. 45 cock that way, 90 cock forward. And this is going to go back in. The 45 is going to go up, and we'll attach that right to the water pump, and then right here to the radiator. Now once we get it in there, we'll go ahead and go through and put all of our worm drive clamps on it and get that all tightened down. All right, now next we're going to go ahead and go into the transmission cooler. We pulled this off earlier along with the two big transmission lines. This part here we're going to reuse, but what we're going to do is be switching it over to using the stainless steel AN lines. So how we're going to do that is this kit's going to come with 4 of these fittings. Now you'll notice 2 of the fittings are large, and then 2 of them are going to be this size, the smaller ones. The larger ones are what's going to go onto this block here, and basically they just thread in where the old lines were. They got the O-ring washer on there to seal it. So we're going to go ahead and throw that on, tighten those up like that, and then we'll reinstall this block back on the transmission. The other 2 fittings here are actually going to go right up here on our oil cooler where it connects into the front up by the radiator there. And the smaller ones will thread in, same thing on to the cooler section up there. And then that's going to allow us to now have AN fittings where we can connect the new tranny cooler lines. Now the 2 tranny cooler lines are going to be exactly the same, except for one of them is slightly longer than the other one. As we put these in there, the 180s degree bend is going to go towards the back here on the transmission side. The longer of the 2 lines is going to go into the top on the transmission block here. So we'll go ahead and get that bolted back up to the transmission. We'll get these lines attached. And the lines, we're basically just going to run them right along here. We're going to go over the top of the supports here, right over here, just below the oil pan. We're going to come out here, and then we're going to shoot it right up there to the transmission cooler. So we'll go over that, and we'll show you what that looks like once we get done with the installation on it. All right, now we've got the transmission cooler lines mounted up and installed, so we'll kind of go over the routing and show you how they are. So again, this is the 180 line here, and the other one's coming up off the top there, and both of those are just going to come right along here, going to go up above the frame, right down here, just under the oil pan. We're going to loop them right around where our oil pump's mounted right now, on the back side of that, and then they're going to come up on the outside of the frame rail, and then you can see them tap right into where they go from the factory right at the radiator there. So now for mounting the oil return pump, we're going to go ahead and start getting the bracket and assembling that ready for that. We're going to be using this bracket. Now the oil pump is going to actually mount right to this bracket here, but before we mount it to it, we're going to use this bracket as a template. This is going to slide right around our radiator core support here, and you can see where one of the existing factory bolt locations was with the M6 bolt there. That's going to line up with the hole right here. So we're going to go ahead and slide this over it and get it to align with that bolt there. Now the other bolt hole here we're going to go ahead and drill. So what we're going to do is come in from the back side and drill that out with the 3/8 drill. And you can see the hole goes all the way through. Once that's done, that's going to allow us to bolt this M10 by 70 millimeter bolt right through there, along with the nut. That's going to hold it up on there. And then we're going to be sticking a bolt in here as well a little bit later, but that's going to actually share the same bolt with our power steering cooler that we're going to be mounting over here. So for the time being, we'll go ahead and leave that one out until we get the pump and everything. So we're going to go ahead and drill this hole and get that mounted up, and then we'll go ahead and bolt the pump to it. Now the pump is basically just going to bolt up, sitting right on top of the bracket just like that. And we're going to be using 4 of the M6 1.0 by 20 millimeter bolts along with a nut, and that's just going to bolt this to the plate. So we'll go ahead and drill our hole, we'll bolt this to the plate, and then we can go ahead and mount this up and put the bolt and everything through it and get this solid mounted in there. All right, now to relocate the power steering cooler, we're going to be mounting that right down here. Remember, we took this off the front where the intercooler is going now, so we're going to relocate that down here. In order to do that, we've got two of these 90-degree L brackets. Now, one of them is longer than the other one. In addition to that, we've got the two sandwich plate washers here. So what we're going to be doing is this is going to mount with the inlet and outlet over on the driver's side here, just like that. And you'll notice this bracket is higher than this one. So the shorter bracket is going to go over here on the driver's side. And we'll go ahead and get this mounted up. And basically the way this works is the 90 degree is going to go on the outside. One of the spacer plates here will go on the inside to sandwich it together. And then we're going to use the M6 1.0 by 16 millimeter bolts with the nut. That's going to bolt that together right there. That's going to bolt it. So now we have the L brackets attached to the power steering cooler here. And once we get done, this is going to bolt up in place just like that. Now these brackets actually go, let me change that there. They should be bolting onto it both like that. And that way they're facing toward, or they're up towards the inlet and outlet and facing forwards. So that when we get done, we're going to bolt it up just like this. Now on the passenger side over here, we're going to be reusing the same bolt hole location that we used earlier when we did the oil cooler install, the oil return pump install for our oil return pump here. It's the same brackets. That one's going to go right over that one, and we're going to bolt that in there. For the driver's side over here, there is no bolt hole, so we're going to be using a self-tapping sheet metal screw, and we'll get that fixed up there just like that. So we'll go ahead and show you what that looks like once we get done. Also for the coolant line, or the lines that connect to it, one of them is coming right from our rack right here. That's just the factory line. And then the other line is the smaller of the two lines, if you remember, that's coming down from the reservoir up top. We'll go ahead and get that one connected to the other one here. All right, now you can see we've got the power steering cooler mounted up here. And again, it's just using the 90-degree brackets and bolting it right to the frame here. And then this one's going over the top of our oil pump bracket here. Now it does look like it's hanging down pretty low, but when we get done, the front bumper is actually going to come down and hang lower than this, so it's not going to be the lowest portion of the vehicle, and we're still up above, higher than the frame rails. Alright, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and install the injectors, and they're pretty simple and straightforward. Basically just unbolt your fuel rails, stick your new injectors in there, plug them in, bolt everything back up. They're a direct plug-in, drop-in injector for this thing, so that's pretty straightforward and simple. Alright, now for the map sensor installation, we're going to go ahead and get that bolted in. Now they don't, as of now, have a 2-bar map sensor that is the twist lock style like this, so what we're going to be doing is using this adapter that converts it back to the older style. Basically the map sensor is just going to go right into this billet aluminum block here. It comes with the 2 Allen head screws, so we're going to go ahead and get that bolted in. Also there's an O-ring that comes with it that's going to slide down into this slot right here, and that way it seals it when we actually put it in. Now this is going to go in and twist and lock like that. There is a little plastic nub that sticks up on the intake manifold that this will actually stop against. Go ahead and gently push it past that. That'll help lock it in place, as well as point the electrical connection over towards the driver's side so it'll readily plug in. The other thing you want to note is the connectors are slightly different. This one's got the tab, the keyway tab on this side, whereas this one had it on this side. So what we're going to need to do is use a grinder real quick and just shave that down. That way that tab is actually missing, and that'll allow the electrical connector to plug in. So we went ahead and shaved that down. We'll go ahead and get this twisted in, locked into place real quick, and we'll show you what it looks like here. And once you get done, it should just bolt on just like that. Alright, now for the intake air temp sensor, we're going to be reusing the factory intake air temp sensor. We've set this up with a 1/4-inch NPT, that's National Pipe Thread Bung, that's in it. Now they do make some aftermarket ones like this. However, for many of you guys that are going to have the longer ones like this, the resistance value is going to be different than these, which is why we're not readily using these and including them with the kit. If your resistance value does match those, you can by all means use those. That'll screw right in and just plug right up. But for those of you guys that don't, that have the longer ones like this, we're going to go ahead and address that. So what you're going to do is get your 1/4-inch NPT die. Now this tap and die kit's pretty cheap. You can get it from Harbor Freight. And since we're just tapping essentially plastic, it does the job spectacularly. So what we're going to do is basically just thread this on. and we're going to cut the threads into the sensor here. We went ahead and also removed the O-ring from there first. And then what we're going to do is basically just slide this up and cut threads in it. And you can do it pretty much just like this by hand because it's soft plastic until we reach the top, just like that. And then we'll go ahead and back it unscrewed out. Now that we've cut threads into this, that's going to allow this temp sensor here to slide readily into our upper intercooler pipe. So we'll go ahead and screw that in right here, and then we can just plug in the electrical connector from there. Alright, now for the oil return lines, basically we've got two 10AN lines. Both of them have a 90 and then a 45 and a 30 on the other end. The longer of the two is going to be the driver's side here. The shorter one's going to be the passenger side. And what we're basically doing is running them from the turbos. Are going to come down and they're going to merge together at this T, and then they're going to go into the oil return pump, which is actually going to suck the oil and feed it back into the engine. So the way we want to orientate these, the driver's side again is the longer one. The 45-degree angle is going to go up on the turbo side, and the 90-degree is going to come down into the side of the T-fitting like this. On the passenger side, the 90 is going to come into the top like this. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get these mounted up on there, and then we'll show you what it looks like once it's actually installed and how exactly they're routed. Alright, now for the bottom side of the oil return lines, I lied to you guys before. I said that the 30 and the 45 both go up on top. That was actually a lie. That is the case on the passenger side, but on the driver's side here, actually for the oil return, the 90 degree is going to go up on top, and then the 45 is going to actually be on the bottom side here. So it's not both 90s on the bottom like I said earlier. So if you want to look up in here, you can see we're dropping down from the turbo. We're going to shoot right over the top of the downpipe here, and then it's going to 45 right into our T here. The passenger side is going to have the 40 or the 30 degree up top. Again, same thing, drop down over the turbo. It's going to come over the top of the downpipe, and then we're going to 90 degree that right here into the T, and then we're just using the double female that goes right into the oil return pump. And then coming off the pump here is our line that's shooting up back towards our cap on the top side, or our oil return port. Now for this one, because it is pretty close up in here to the downpipe, what we're going to do is actually go ahead and attach a cushion clamp here. So we'll get this around the pipe, and we're going to loosen this bolt up for the AC compressor, and we're going to pin that up there. That's going to help hold this line and make sure it stays off the downpipe. That way we're not burning it or melting anything there. For the second part of the oil return, what we're going to be doing is coming from the oil return pump with the -6 line. That's going to connect up, and the 90 degree is going to go up on top. The 45 is going to go down below on the pump, so we're going to connect that to the pump. We're going to route this up, and then this is going to plug into this -6 to 1/4 inch adapter right here. Now what we've done for this adapter is go ahead and pull the intake manifold off, and then halfway in between the edge of this and this port here, we basically just drill a hole, and we'll tap it with a 1/4 inch NPT, that's 1/4 inch National Pipe Thread tap. And then we'll blow everything out since we got it off, blow everything out, get all the shavings and everything out of it, and then we'll go ahead and Teflon the backside of that fitting and thread it in there. This is where our oil is going to actually come, so it's going to drop down from the turbos to the pump and be pumped back in to right here, which is basically right where you normally fill your oil. We're just pumping it in on the bottom side of that. Alright, now to reinstall the fuse box, again we pulled up all this stuff earlier because it was sitting over here. We're going to be relocating it right over here. So what we're going to do first is, this is our new fuse box bracket that we're going to be attaching it to, and the fuse box is basically just going to snap right onto this in each one of these little clips. Now it is keyed, so it's only going to go on one way. You can't get it on backwards. So we'll snap that into there, and then this is going to bolt up, and this big one down here is going to go to the strut tower, or the strut bolt down here, and the other one's going to come up on the strut tower here. And so you got our two mounting points here and here, which is going to locate the fuse box like that. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get everything plugged in on here. We're going to route the wires right across here and then up and into them. So let's get this bolted up, and then we'll show you what it looks like once it's all put together and final assembled in there. Alright, now you can see we've got the fuse box all mounted up in here, and again we're using one of the strut tower bolts here to mount it, as well as down here. And that's going to make this nice and secure up here with it relocated off to the side. Now all of the wiring is going to come down. It's going to go actually up under this right in here. Now we did make modifications to the one main power wire here that goes to the fuse box. This was originally longer because the fuse box was sitting over here. So what we did is we went ahead and cut that down. And then in addition, we're adding in this 4-gauge wire here. And we're going to go ahead and crimp both these two wires together inside of one eyelet that comes with the kit. Get this open here, so you can see the eyelet in here. So we're going to crimp both these two wires together inside the eyelet, so they're just going to daisy chain it together. And then this 4-gauge wire here is going to come up over and tap right into right there. So go ahead and install the eyelet to that and put that up on there. That way it's going to clean this up so you don't have too long of an excess wire hanging out, and it redoes the power wire going to the box there. Alright, now for the oil return pump wiring, what we're going to do is take it from the oil return pump, route it right up along here, over here to this fender well here, and we're going to be mounting our relay up here. Now the way we're going to wire this, for those of you that aren't familiar with a relay, I've got another install video or how-to video on how relays work. Definitely suggest checking that out, give that a watch. That way you kind of familiarize yourself with it. What we're going to be doing is using the relay basically as an amplifier. So what we're going to do is run our power supply is going to come from, you can either pull it from the fuse box or you can pull it from over here. If you're pulling it from someplace that's not fused, you do want to make sure you put an inline fuse in along with it. So we're going to go ahead and do a fusible link is what we did off of this one here. That comes over, and that's going to be our power supply for pin 87. Pin 30 is going to be the output that goes out to the oil return pump on the power wire. This is going to be the red wire obviously on the oil return pump. The black wire is just the ground. We're just going to ground that right at the oil return pump, right to the chassis. Then we're going to get our negative trigger is just going to actually right here, or even right where you mount it up to. You can see the blue wire here is going to be our negative trigger. We're just going to anywhere again on the chassis. And then the positive trigger, what we're going to do is T-tap, and you can see our T-tap back in here. And that's going to be the power wire going to the injector. Now that's the wire that it's on this one, it's brown with a white stripe. You can usually tell whichever one's the positive feed for the injector because it'll be common and shared amongst all the injectors. So all of these injectors have one wire that's brown with a white stripe. On this one it actually happens to be a little bit heavier gauge too. So we're going to take that one, we're going to steal our ignition power off that way. That way anytime this is keyed on or the engine's running, you're getting power to the fuel injector, it's going to trigger the relay, which is going to power up the fuel or the oil return pump, and that way our oil return pump is going to be constantly pumping the oil back into the engine. That way we're not flooding it out and leaving it inside the turbos and backing it up inside the oil lines there. So again, pin 87 is our power supply, which is coming our 12 volt positive. Pin 30 is our output to the pump, to the positive leg on the pump. The negative leg we're just going to take to chassis ground. Pin 85 we're going to take to chassis ground, and pin 86 we're going to go ahead and take that over to the 12 volt off of the fuel injector, which is again the brown and white wire. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and mount the replacement washer fluid reservoir. So the factory one we went and took out and discarded that. Before we do that, we're going to pull the pump out of it. The pump is going to mount right in here. So it's got the little grommet that sits down inside there, and the pump, just like the factory one, is going to slide right in there. Now it's important to note, on the pump there is a little plastic nub that sticks up here. We're going to go ahead and grind that off, and that way once you slide this in here, it should actually pop into place just like that. Optional, if you guys want, you can, and then we recommend it, is to swap over the level sending unit as well. For this, it's going to be an 1 1/8" hole that you drill in here. And then we're going to reuse the sending unit as well as the grommet out of the existing original one. Now these will plug back in just like they were from the factory. Along with this, we're going to be mounting it right down here in the similar area. So first what we'll do is we'll mount the fill neck, which is going to be this guy right here. And we're just going to use self-tapping screws here and here and drill it right into the strut tower. We have the clear hose that's going to connect to that with a hose clamp. That's going to run down right behind and below the turbo here, up underneath the headlight, and it's going to come right down to here, basically where factory one was, and that's where we're going to be mounting this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the long washer fluid L bracket like that. We're going to go ahead and mount it up just like that, and then that is going to bolt right in here. So you can see we've got the bolt loosened up and out right here, one of the bumper bolts. So that's going to bolt up right in there, basically just like that. From there we'll go ahead and cut this hose here to length, so that way it fits up on there, and hose clamp it on here. And then we'll go ahead and plug all of our electrical in and should be good to go with that. Alright, for the coolant overflow here, we'll go ahead and put that in there. It's basically this catch can here. Now what we're going to do is use an M8 by 16 millimeter bolt here. We're going to stick 2 washers on the back side of it. That's going to space it out, because right here on the head where we're going to be bolting it up, it's kind of got a little recess in it. So we'll stick the 2 of those on the back side there, and then we're going to bolt that in there, and it's going to sit basically like that there. Now the bottom port here, we're going to plug in the hose from a radiator fill neck. That's going to go to the bottom. That way as the coolant expands, it fills it up, and then when it cools down, it'll suck it back in. The top one here is basically just a bleed port to vent the excess off of it. So what we're going to do is stick a hose on this one, and we're just going to run it basically outside the car, down the bottom somewhere. That way, if it does actually overfill this thing, it's not spraying coolant all over your engine bay. It's just going to dribble it out on the bottom there, and that way it has a place to vent the pressure off. All right, we got a few last things that we got to button up here. We're going to go ahead and bleed the brakes. Just follow along with Dodge's schedule as far as how to do that. Aside from that, we're going to go ahead and start assembling the front, and then it's basically ready for get it thrown on the dyno and get it tuned. Now, we do always recommend to have these things professionally dyno tuned. Don't use a cookie cutter off-the-shelf kind of tune. Actually have your independent car done specifically and have it done by a qualified dyno tuner, not just some guy who knows how to tune kind of thing. So let's go ahead and get this buttoned up and see what it does.